has held a lifelong interest in UFOs and been involved in personal research and investigation until 1989, when he and his wife Susan moved to New Mexico. At that time, she was serving in the Air Force and stationed at Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis for 3 years. During this time, Michael had the opportunity to do research at the heart of the phenomena, namely the city of Roswell, my old employer. There, he met and talked with a number of other researchers who lived in the area, and in 1990 hosted Roswell specialist researchers and authors Donald Schmidt and Kevin Randall, and an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel who had a tremendous database of knowledge and experience working with the Air Force on the subject of UFOs. Michael's resulting friendship with the officer resulted in his learning much regarding the UFO phenomena. He put his UFO interest on temporary hold when he and Susan moved to Florida, where he entered a doctoral program in clinical psychology at Nova Southeastern University. His two areas of specialization were gerontology, the physiological study of older adults, and anxiety disorders. Graduating from NSU in 1997, he accepted an internship at the Veterans Administration in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. While there, he underwent extensive training in treating mental illness, trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder in combat veterans. He also received his Level 2 certification in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing from the techniques created. His good work was not lost on the administration of the hospital, and he was offered a position as a group and individual psychotherapist treating traumatized and chronically mentally ill veterans. He retired in 2008 as a result of an automobile accident, but took the opportunity to pursue his interest in the UFO phenomena full time. Now, Michael has been a member of MUFON since 2003, and in 2009 decided he wanted to train to become a field investigator in the Philadelphia area. In 2010, he became the state section director for Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, and was made the chief investigator of the state of Delaware in 2012. Now, in 2012, that fall, while working at the annual UFO conference, he had the opportunity to have a conversation with me, and we hit it off like gangbusters. During our talk, Michael expressed a desire to work in an area he had always been fascinated by, but never had the time or opportunity to pursue. And I think you can guess what it was: UFO-related abductions. At that time, I gave Michael several leads I thought might assist him, and the names of a number of individuals, colleagues, and friends in the work he might contact. Of all the leads, he was attracted to one name, that of Audrey Hewins, who he called, and the rest, as they say, is history. Audrey was understandably impressed with his experience and asked him to create a Pennsylvania chapter of the Starborn support group she had founded here in Maine. He then sought out several people he thought would work well within that small but growing organization, and Chris Augustin, Julia Weiss, and Laura Weiser immediately jumped right on the boat. Michael and his co-directors created Starborn Support Radio, which now is heard around the world. Though still rather modest in size, its audience continues to grow with every Sunday broadcast. Please join me in giving a special welcome to my friend and colleague, Michael Austin Melton.
Hey everybody, how are you? I have a little presentation today on PTSD and alien abduction. And what I want to do is share with you some goals of the presentation. I want to talk about a concept that I call the world view, which is involved in the development, the seeding and development of PTSD. Yes, thank you. Then I want to talk about post-traumatic stress and its old name, post-abduction syndrome. They're identical, really. There's no difference between the two. I want to talk about healing, and then I want to talk about Starborn support, and I want you to meet my colleagues. They're going to come up here and say a few words about themselves and their working in our little Pennsylvania chapter. Okay. There's the goals. The goals of the presentation. I'd like to promote to people who are abductees, interested in abduction, general public. I would like to make them aware of the phenomenon. I would like to have them understand the pain and the trauma and sometimes the positives that result. I want to promote understanding as part of our little Starborn support organization. I want people to understand that abductees are not insane or plagued with hallucinations and delusions. Instead, I would like to call these normal individuals under abnormal circumstances. I'd like to see a general acceptance by the public. I would like to try, through our organization and through our work, to change the outlook of people who believe we are alone in the universe, this huge universe, or understand, or believe that God just put life on this little sand of a planet in a big, big ocean. I would like to see normalization take place. I'd like to see alien abduction and the associated post-traumatic stress that comes with it as a problem to be addressed and not a disease to be medicated. So what is the answer we're looking for, and where will we find it? My theory that I'm working on is within each abductee, within each one, lies a piece of the puzzle, a piece of the answer that we're looking for. Ufology, UFOs, abduction, the whole ball of wax. And when it's time, it will come out. It will come together. We'll all work on it together. Hopefully, people who are not on board will come on board seeing the importance of this, because the answers are sitting right before us. So let's talk now about the phenomenon of shattered reality, or the worldview. This is kind of partly my own theory that I put together, and also I'm pulling from a couple of other ideas that are out there. But the phenomenon of shattered reality, paradigm change, conventions being challenged. I'd like to start off with a little short story, and this is a short story that's kind of exaggerated. It's kind of like the ideal situation, so that I can, demonstrate what happens. So I'm going to read it for you here. We're going to talk about the life of a guy named Fred. A normal life. He has a good life. Fred wakes up in the morning to bright sunshine. He feels refreshed, and he gets right up, jumps into the shower, and gets ready for work. Fred gets dressed, runs downstairs to the kitchen, grabs a cup of coffee, and out the door he goes. Fred has a great day at work. The boss even pulled him into the office to talk about that raise that he was interested in. Lunch with his co-workers was great. And these co-workers admire him for his drive and work ethic. After work, Fred jumps back into the car and heads home. The traffic was annoying, but he looked forward to the kids greeting him and his spouse having a great big hug and a great dinner ready, despite the fact that she herself worked a full day. So perfect. So when Fred gets home, he enjoys the hugs and the attention. And the dinner, and Fred plans on a quiet evening with the family for movie night. After the movie, Fred heads up the stairs, puts the kids into bed, reads a story or two, and heads for his own bed, where Wilma is waiting, sleeping soundly. Fred crawls into bed and snuggles up and thinks to himself, "What a beautiful life I have." But on this particular night, however, things are going to change drastically. They take a turn toward the dark, terrorizing reality Fred has been running from since he was a child. Fred will be abducted by aliens tonight, but this time, for some unknown reason, he will remember things, a lot of things. As he sits and he thinks, when he wakes up in the morning, his anxiety level rises and he has no reason why. What's going on? Why do I feel this way? Perplexed and bewildered, suddenly he starts to realize that something is not right, that something happened to him. He looks at himself, he has marks. He's bleeding a little bit from the marks. He feels shaken. He's exhausted. Fred's worldview is becoming shattered. Okay. Oh, that was the slide. Okay. So let me talk about the worldview for a minute. The worldview is basically, how we look at the world, how we interpret reality. It's very complex and very personal. It's like fingerprints. No two people have the same interpretation of reality. Like a puzzle with all the pieces that fit together perfectly. And the tighter the fit of the puzzle, the more together the person seems to be. Well, when abduction memories start to come to the fore and they start, thinking about this stuff, let me see. Yeah. It's like Fred's abductors took a piece of a foreign puzzle and just flung it right into the heart of this nice view of reality that he had and completely blew it apart. And not only did the piece of puzzle blow blow his reality apart, it changed every piece of the puzzle so that now he's got a completely strange, unusual, and new reality that he has to piece together. When that moment arrives, when all of a sudden he looks at himself, he looks at the world as foreign, that's the seed that starts post-traumatic stress disorder. And the fuel that keeps it going is the attempt to try and reassemble the new puzzle, the new reality. During that time, you begin to question things. You question your life, your loves, how the world works, your faith, and you even begin to question yourself. Who am I? What's going on here? And so what are we dealing with? What are we dealing with? Is it a process of hybridization, overtaken, destroyed by aliens, integration into our society, takeover and slavery? No one knows. We can only speculate and hope that the answer is positive. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of clinical information about PTSD. The severity... This is the first time I've ever worked PowerPoint. Excuse me. There we go. Talk about post-traumatic stress and post-abduction syndrome. There are a lot of similarities. Like I said, I think they're identical. I think the fact that professionals take a look at it as something serious is just a big mistake. So let's talk about the severity of PTSD. What happens and how does it become so severe? How does it hurt and damage the individual? Well, there are a lot of variabilities that have to be considered. The first one is the intensity of the trauma. There are so many factors involved, but just a few are, that each person might interpret the trauma or experience the trauma differently. It depends on a lot of things. How open were their minds before the abduction took place? Were they the kind of person that had an open mind and looked at the world as something that, is interesting? The universe is populated with all kinds of alien brothers. Or were they closed-minded and, reserved and did not want to deal with anything beyond their reality that, they put together? Also, being hurt physically or losing something or someone. Sometimes the abductions cause physical injury, and this intensifies the severity of PTSD. Also, there's the case of hybrid children. A lot of people are taken aboard a ship and presented with these little children or these young children that they are supposed to give affection to. That's their direction. And then all of a sudden, they're off the ship, the child is not there. There's a connection made, and this loss intensifies the severity of PTSD. The closeness to the traumatic event also affects how bad it is. What level of encounter is experienced? We have several levels. Did they just witness a craft? Did they witness, landing marks after they saw the craft? Did they see creatures, aliens, outside of the craft? Or were they abducted, or were they abducted over and over? One of the most important things is that feeling of loss of control. The things you can't control, almost unbelievably immense. You can't control the panic or the anxiety. You can't control others' reactions. Most importantly, you can't control future abductions, or when they will happen, or how to escape them, or what to do. But the main determining factor, I think, is lack of support. When this happens and you become bewildered and you're questioning and you don't know what's going on, alienation from friends take place, family, society, and even insulating oneself from this strange new reality that they have to deal with. So what happens after the fact? Some of the many symptoms of PTSD. The array of symptoms vary not only in intensity, but another factor is the individual's constitution. Their susceptibility to certain symptoms. For example, are they the nervous type to begin with? Or are they fairly together and they don't react much when under stress? These are just little personality quirks that affect how severe it's going to be. Overall, however, the following symptoms are just about found in everyone suffering from PTSD, regardless of the intensity. The first set of symptoms are the feeling of upset and anxious by anything that reminds the person of the incident. How many people remember looking at Whitley Strieber's cover on Communion the first time? I've never been abducted. I've only seen UFOs, but when I saw that, it was, whoa, what are we dealing with? Also, talking about the incident, images, sounds, objects, movies, TV shows. There are plenty of stimulus out there that kind of like pull us back, and we don't want to deal with this. Also, nightmares. Lots of nightmares, vivid dreams make you feel like the event is happening all over again. Most of you know how real those dreams can be if you've been abducted. In the case of a multiple abductee, I would say it's much worse, because dreams, especially vivid ones, are hard to distinguish from the actual event that takes place. Also, there seems to be this phenomenon called soul abductions or mind abductions, where the person is not physically taken, but their essence or their consciousness is abducted. This is also really very scary, and they're hard to separate from a dream, and they can really frighten the individual beyond imagination for those people going through that. The other one is the feeling, a terrible sense of isolation from others. You're feeling ostracized, feeling shoved aside, lonely and alone. And this loneliness can even be felt in a room full of people. You can be sitting there feeling so foreign and different, even with a group of friends. Also, there's feeling emotionally numb or having no interest in things that used to be interesting. Part of the PTSD syndrome is pulling yourself back even from the things that you love, from the people that you love. If you like to go bowling, or if you like to go to movies, or if you like to spend time at the bar with friends, that goes away. You kind of pull back on that because you really don't want to mingle with anybody, because you don't want to let them know what's going on. You're afraid to talk about it because they're not going to want to listen to that. Also, we have the onset or worsening of depression. If the individual was depressed before this happened, they're going to get more depressed because of all the stuff that's going on inside of them. There's a deepening sense of hopelessness, loss, as you question life, its meaning, and even sometimes to the point where people want to end it all. There's also the constant sense of being in danger. Vigilance in reference to the environment. You're always scanning. You're looking for stimulus. You're looking for anything that might remind you or maybe even trigger a panic reaction. Also feeling anxious, jittery, and irritated. Related to the above, worry, nervousness, being impatient and snappy with family members or friends. All of these things take place. Panic attacks focused on the feeling that something bad is about to happen. All the time, something bad is about to happen. It's worse in abductees that are abducted in the daylight or abducted at various times or locations. Additionally, and this is really terrible for some people, some abductees can sense when an abduction is about to take place. And when that happens, all of the panic and the anxiety starts setting in, driving the person, to become very difficult to deal with, very difficult to, stay together. Also, difficulty sleeping or staying asleep. This is common among abductees, and many sleep with the lights on, radio or TV playing. I spoke with one woman from the UK who was having really severe problems with her abductions. And she told me that one time she went to bed with her husband and tied a rope around her wrist and then tied the rope around her husband's wrist to try and prevent the abduction from taking place. Well, it didn't prevent the abduction from taking place. She was still taken. And in the morning, when she woke up and, recalled all of this stuff, the rope was still tied around her wrist and her husband's wrist. So you really can't prevent them. Also, we have the reduced ability to concentrate. The intrusive thoughts, the feelings of anxiety, that feeling of being out of control, worrying about the world around you and how you're going to put that puzzle back together. These things can get in the way of concentration, and even to the point of invading and preventing you from accomplishing the activities of daily living. Also, difficulty getting along with family members where prior there were no issues at all, or worsening of relationships in the family. Interestingly enough, and I found this very common in combat veterans when I was treating them at the VA, and I'm not really sure whether I've seen this in a lot of abductees, but I think that this applies. There's an increase in meaningful activities. This increase in meaningful activities is meant to distract the person from thinking about all of the problems that they're having with their abduction. For example, they constantly work overtime. They take any kind of job that they can get so that they can keep their minds occupied and they don't have to deal with this. Also, some people might increase the workload that they do when they're exercising. They might go running constantly. And, when these things take place, you start to damage your system. The stress hormones start breaking down vital functions in the body. Also, one of the most terrible ones is, let me see, I don't have that in there, that's all right. But pulling away from the social environment, this is a bad thing. The feeling of isolation, you pull back, you build that wall, that impenetrable wall, because you really are afraid of anybody ridiculing you or ostracizing you. It's a disconnection from society completely. Some additional stressful events that take place, it really makes it worse, PTSD worse, if there's a history, a pre-morbid history of physical abuse or sexual abuse. Sometimes even socioeconomic factors play into it because some people don't have the ability to find someone to help them. It's terrible that way for some people who don't have the ability to find help. And this affects the length of time it takes for them to put things together. And one thing I want to remind everybody of is that there's no normal when it comes to post-traumatic stress. Everybody's post-traumatic stress is different, unique. The intensity, the difference in symptoms. So it takes a lot of work within themselves and with a professional to kind of help put things back together. I'd like to move on to talking about recovery, support, and treatment. Now, the first thing I want to do is present some medication, which, and I know there's a lot of people here that feel that medication does nothing but complicate things and overall does more harm than good. My contention is, though, that under good controlled circumstances with a reliable and highly efficient physician, somebody who really knows what they're doing, medications can assist to resolve the PTSD quickly, because there are a lot of benefits if it's done right. The first type of medication that is used are SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These drugs regulate mood, anxiety, appetite, and sleep. And what they do for somebody who has post-traumatic stress is they help to control the anger, it helps to increase concentration, and it assists the person in getting the sleep that they need. Some examples are Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac. We also use mood stabilizers, we psychiatrists. These are normally, in modern day today, are anticonvulsants and anti-epileptics. And they're used mainly with people who have comorbid bipolar disorder or some other severe mental disorder that's inhibiting treatment from taking place. Some of those are Tegretol, Depakote, Topamax, or Lamictal, which are all neuroactive drugs. We also use benzodiazepines, but these are highly addictive and dangerous drugs. So they're only used in persons with intractable anxiety, uncontrollable fear, uncontrollable anxiety, can't sleep, lots of physical pain, pulling back. And some of them are Ativan, Klonopin, and Xanax. We're all familiar with those. And Xanax is probably one of the most addictive drugs that we have. I'm going to move on to a little bit of psychotherapy now. And there are several preferred forms of psychotherapy that we can use. First one is cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on thinking, ideation, and the behavioral errors we make that keep our attention on the trauma and the symptoms that accompany it. Well, through didactic conversation with a therapist, back and forth, two-way conversation, these problems are challenged and they're tested in reality. And what happens is we tend to help the client maintain a clear focus and understand the symptoms more so that they can control them and move forward towards putting that puzzle back together. The other form of therapy is EFT, emotionally focused therapy. And this therapy is based on humanistic theories of emotion and attachment. And it works through awareness, regulation, reflection, and finally transformation of the unhealthy emotions in the context of a positive and trusting therapeutic relationship, one of the more effective forms of therapy. The one that I'm most familiar with and that I use with combat veterans is EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And the emphasis here is on the disturbing memories as the cause of the psychopathology that's taking place, cause of the post-traumatic stress. And we use this in the most severe cases of combat trauma because it is much more intense and it's physically draining. I can remember treating a couple of Vietnam veterans that had such terrible, terrible experience in Vietnam, such terrible trauma that he mentally went back to the jungle. He was sweating, he was on the floor, he was crouching down behind chairs. And so was I. I mean, it was very, very intense. But, after we got through that session, he was able to reprocess the event in a healthier way and realize that perhaps he didn't have so much to do with the terrible things that happened. So relieving the trauma is the main focus, and we reprocess that trauma into a more tolerable scenario. And what happens when we do that, when we reframe everything, it allows the person the opportunity to develop more adaptive behavior and skills. The other form is regressive hypnotherapy. And even today, regressive hypnotherapy is still looked upon as being controversial. However, it really is one of the more effective treatments. I think it was in 2001, the National Council of Hypnotherapy set forth some guidelines, particularly for people who reported abduction and wanted to undergo hypnosis. A full medical and psychiatric history would be taken, and the alien abduction clients, because of the ridicule factor, would receive the same treatment and courtesy that anybody else would get. The therapist has to be non-directive. For example, you wouldn't want to ask a question like, okay, tell me about your UFO abduction. That's not what we would call non-directive. The therapist has to ask non-leading questions. For example, you would not want to ask an abductee, what happened next? Did the UFO land in the backyard? Well, there's a tendency to want to please your hypnotist, and you might say, yeah, it landed in the backyard, and you go further, and you kind of really contaminate the whole process. Interestingly enough, the first couple to undergo this were Betty and Barney Hill. They were the first ones to actually use regression therapy. The next one that I want to talk about is the one that we use at Starborn Support. The support group actually goes under the moniker of Supportive Expressive Group Therapy. It actually is therapy. One of the ways that they handle acute trauma, if there's a car accident or an explosion or a particularly painful and horrible murder that somebody witnesses, the first thing they want to do is have the person sit down, very first thing, and talk about the trauma. By doing this, you lessen the impact. You're talking about it and someone's understanding you already, and you're starting to reprocess it right at that moment. So our goal at Starborn Support is to have multiple support groups in every state, and we want to have support groups all over the state. For example, in Pennsylvania, we have a pretty big state. So my particular goal is to have one in the Philadelphia area, perhaps one in the far northeast, central Pennsylvania, north and south, and perhaps over in the Pittsburgh area and down south towards West Virginia. That we're working on, and I think we have found one gentleman who is really interested in helping out. The supportive expressive group therapy immediately reduces the group members' feeling of isolation, loneliness, it reduces anxiety, and gives the person a sense of community. And this is really important because the isolation, like I said, is one of the most damaging factors or symptoms. Now, supportive group therapy, as in any other group therapy, have what a gentleman by the name of Irvin Yalom, who back in the 70s and 80s was the guru of group therapy. He was the one that really taught us group therapists and group process people about how group works. We have what are called supportive factors, curative factors, which constitute the power behind the group. And I would like to let you in on some of those curative factors and how they work. The first one is the installation of hope. And that is the sentence that one might say, I know this group is going to help me. Next is universality. Being in a support group, you say to yourself, I'm finding out that we are all in the same boat. We're in this together. I don't have to feel alone or be alone anymore. The next one is the imparting of information. And remember, knowledge is power. You might say, I am learning about abduction. I'm learning how to handle my anxiety and fear. I am learning about others and their experiences too. The next one is altruism, which is going beyond one's own needs, going beyond one's self and helping another. The sentence might be that you say to yourself, I can share my experiences and others might benefit from that. The next one is development of socialization, something that goes away in PTSD. Look at all these people I've met. It would be a good idea for us to exchange information so that we can keep in contact. Then we have imitative behavior, which is adapting the attributes of higher functioning group members. For example, look at how he's handling his stress. Man, I think I'm going to try what he's doing because it really works for him. Then you have catharsis. Catharsis is the expression of powerful emotion. You find out that you're comfortable enough in this group and you trust the people in the group to the point where you allow yourself to break down, to cry, to talk about all of the painful things that you're going through, and find support from the other group members. And then we have existential factors, which is dealing with the meaning of life, starting to put that puzzle back together again, and the events in life that have affected the person, reflecting on the quality of our life and our behavior, and finally the capstone of existential realization, taking responsibility for one's own behavior and changing their world based on their responsibility for themselves. So for practical applications, in the middle of this symptom package, this post-traumatic stress, what can you do to assure progress? Well, the first one is give yourself time. Realize that this is going to be a fairly long process. You won't have the pieces of this puzzle together in a day, in a week, in a year. It's slow and intense work. Try to be patient with your changing emotional state. You're going to go up and down. You're going to have good days and bad days. It'll be wonderful one day, and you want to kill yourself the next. So be patient with that. Just be there, observe these behaviors, and let them pass by, because things will change. Things change dramatically in the process. And you have the support of your group. Then you can't be afraid to ask for support. Hopefully, by the time you're at this stage and you're secure and comfortable in the group, you're going to lose some of that fear of asking for help, asking for others to listen. I have something to talk about. I need to tell you about this. Do you have the time to sit down with me? Now, I know this, some people might think this doesn't belong here, but it really does. You want to try and engage in healthy behaviors. You want to take care of yourself. Eat healthy, good diet. Get the required amount of sleep if you can. Learn to listen to your body's signals and give in to what it needs. You want to try to establish routines. By doing this, you tend to eliminate or greatly reduce those feelings of chaos or loss of control. For example, when I go to bed every night, I sleep with the light on. I go to bed when I'm very tired, and I fall asleep easier that way. A little routine. Light on, go to bed when you're tired, and you tend to fall asleep. Also, you want to get back to those things that you love to do. Make every effort to resume your hobbies, or make every effort to try and go out with some people that you trust. Start getting your feet wet again in the society that you live in. And you want to avoid making any big decisions during this process. Don't buy a house, don't get married, don't get divorced, and don't put together an expedition to climb Mount Everest. Also, when seeking out a therapist sensitive to your specific issues, remember that Starborn support can help you with the task. We are in the process of developing a network of people all around the country of providers sensitive toward the needs of the experiencers and abductees. If you can't find a therapist, contact us at Starborn Support to arrange some sort of therapy by phone. We can connect you with a provider who can do therapy via Skype or Uvu, or we can talk to you directly. I talk to about a half a dozen people now on a bi-weekly or monthly basis to help them just keep things together. Now I want to introduce you to my colleagues. I think it's time you've listened to me bore you enough. And I want to bring these guys up. I want to read, first of all, a little bit about them. You all know Chris here. He's the guy running all of the audio-video stuff. He is my colleague. I've known him for about 5 years. And he is co-director of Starborn Support of Southeastern Pennsylvania. Chris has experienced numerous UFO and paranormal-related phenomena. He has visited Area 51 and holds the distinction of having been chased by a genuine black helicopter. I consider Chris the abduction expert in my group. He also sits on the board of directors for Starborn Support of Maine, our international headquarters here. He has endured a lifetime of interaction with extraterrestrials, and I said earlier, abduction by the same. Chris runs and maintains his own website, aliensthetruth.com. You've heard this before, but I think it's important to hear it again. It's very popular and has been visited by people from all over the free world. Through his website, Chris is working very intently to expose the denied truth and facts behind UFO and abduction phenomena. He is also the facilitator of the Philadelphia UFO Meetup Group. It's a once-a-month support group and educational group that covers everything from abductions, ufology, and occasionally we talk about the conspiracy theory of the week. We consider this group an important extension of our organization. Chris is also, as you know, we talked about earlier, a celebrity of our organization, having been interviewed on numerous radio shows and television specials. Julia Weiss has a degree in business administration from Temple University. She has a 30-year work history as an accountant representative in the telecommunications industry. She has had a lifelong interest in UFOs. She has experienced very vivid dreams or memories, we're not really sure yet, I think they're memories, of seeing UFO lights on the bottom of alien craft hovering above her. She receives knowledge from some of the beings that she encounters, some very, very good knowledge, very applicable knowledge. Outstanding from her other experiences is a fragmented memory of being laid out on a table with human-looking doctors surrounding her in an alien craft. When her son went off to college, she felt empty. There was something missing. After sighting of a silvery disc, a quite large silvery disc, she was encouraged to file a report with MUFON. After that, she began attending MUFON conferences. After her third conference, she was recruited by MUFON and spent a year as a field investigator. I had the pleasure of being her state section director and was highly impressed with her excellent investigation skills and her detailed reports. Very good stuff. When I moved on to another position, she became the state section director, and then I recruited her for Starborn Support. She is also co-director of Starborn Support of Southeastern Pennsylvania. I wanted her to work with me not only because of her skills as an investigator. I saw in her something more. I saw her openness and sensitivity towards others, her open mind, and her extraordinary perception of the more spiritual aspects of this business. Today she wears two hats. She remains a state section director for MUFON, and she is a colleague and co-director of Starborn Support of Southeastern Pennsylvania, and she also sits on the board of our parent organization. Laura Weiser graduated from Temple University in 1992 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology. She went on to Thomas Jefferson University, where she earned a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing. She practiced as a registered nurse for 8 years, and currently she's working for the family business Weiser Homes Incorporated as a licensed insurance agent and certified notary. She manages the insurance and notary work for the company as well as managing other aspects of the business. Laura is also a certified field investigator for MUFON in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania. She has been actively involved in the study of ufology for 26 years. I recruited Laura to co-direct SEPA, that's our abbreviation, with me and Chris and Julia, not only because of her skills as an investigator and her educational background, but she is inquisitive by nature, she's detailed in her research. She has incredible analytical skills, and her medical and psychological background, her humility, her integrity, and personable nature make her a perfect fit for our organization. I have an exceptional crew, and I want to bring them right up to the microphone now so that they can share a little bit about themselves. Why don't we start out with Chris? Talk about what you are what you're doing in Starborn Support and what your goals are for the organization, and just your general overall impression of the fantastic work that you're doing.
Feels like I was just up here. As Mike said, I say the token experiencer of the group, but my input, I would say, is valued by the team, because a lot of the people that we deal with, what they share resonates directly with me. Even if you've never experienced this, I'm sure you've read about things and seen it in documentaries. So just having gone through it personally isn't everything. That's why I have to do research as well. Being a part of this organization is great because I feel like I'm truly giving back. I know I'm not the only person who have gone through these things. I know they are difficult. I know I am still struggling today, as you saw me speak about earlier. I don't think I'll ever come to terms with it. I'll probably die without ever knowing all of the reasons behind these experiences. All I know is they are, they were, they will be a part of my life. I'm not alone. And that's why I'm really driven to do what I do. And, I obviously cannot work at full capacity with the folks in Maine, and, there are abductees worldwide. Even though Philly, there's tons of activity. And what we're doing with the radio show, over 15,000 listeners in just a few months, I'd say is pretty impressive for a group of 4 people. So I thank you. I definitely recommend to people all the time, you need to share something. You're not going to be judged. You're not going to be ridiculed. You're not going to be considered as a kook, a tinfoil hat wearing UFO nut, as I'm sure the majority of those people in the room have been called in one conversation or another. Talked about that at lunch. But yeah, that's what I do. That's why I think this is important, and that's why I need to be here. I need to be sharing my story, because it's your story. Thank you.
And now the wonderful Julia Weiss. Come on up and talk.
Thank you. This is my first time speaking in public, so bear with me. I'm really nervous.
I'm not a good speaker.
Well, I just want to thank Mike Melton and Audrey for even considering me. It's just an honor. And in MUFON, we do scientific studies of UFOs. We do everything by the book. That's one level. This is a totally different level. This is what I've been searching for my whole life. At 52 years old, it's like all of a sudden, whoosh, I find Mike. We all found each other at MUFON. Synchronicity, Suzanne Chandler spoke about that. Boom, boom, boom. We met each other. We knew each other, like we're family. I consider them my brothers and sisters. They're like family. People I've gotten to meet just the first time here. It's like family. We've all experienced something. We're all aware. We're becoming aware together. And it's so beautiful. What a wonderful experience. You know you're in the right place when boom, 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 things start to happen. The radio show, it was like overnight. There were so many people that started listening. The first night I wondered, is anyone listening? And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, the first night we were at my house, the first night, and we heard the people that were tuned into our station, they heard it like a whoosh, whoosh, like a helicopter sound. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And believe me, every Sunday night when we air the show, I hear helicopters above my house. I even, at my pool, not my personal pool, the pool, country club pool, I had a black helicopter come visit me. And all the old ladies were looking up, what's that? I think it's here for me. It's like totally black, really low, hovering over the pool. We have 1 million traffic helicopters go by. I've never seen a military helicopter over the pool. Lots of stuff happened after I started with this radio show. I've had a black car chase me down a parking lot with an old man in it. It wasn't your typical men in black, but it was very odd that this man in a black Lincoln was chasing me right off the road. I was just walking out of a store in my neighborhood. So it was like, that's when I knew I'm in the right place. So the government doesn't scare me. I know that I've had, let's see what happened. So we were able to, there was a phone number that called into our show the first night, and that's the number that somehow triggered this helicopter sound. So we got rid of it. Ever since then, we've had really good shows. We were able to hear.
Debbie actually looked it up on
Yeah.
the internet and found out that the exact location of where this was coming from.
Right, it
A
was
phone booth.
phone booth. So the other thing I have to say is, when you know this is your heart, and Starborn is my heart, when Mike first asked me, I was excited and honored, but I was scared, because I'm like, now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. I'm going to hear all these experiences. And yes, I do go to sleep with a hall light on. But, but each and every week when we have a different guest, they say something, and I'm like, yeah, I've experienced that. Oh, like all these memories started to come up. Oh yeah, I've woken up paralyzed, and yeah, I've had dreams where I was taken up, and yeah, I had that ringing in my ears, and yeah, all the different little things that people. So then I started to think, maybe all these dreams, I just assumed they were dreams. They were very realistic. But every time I would have a dream, I would wake up in absolute pain, like on my body, like I'm going back into my body, and it's painful. And then I would feel like paralyzed, trying to wake up, desperately trying to wake up, but you know, that horrible feeling. And then you're up, and then you're like, did I just dream this, or was it real? So I know I'm in the right place, because all of us have had experiences. But when we hear other people and their experiences, and we start to say, yeah, I had that, maybe this happened to me, maybe it's happening for a reason, all this is happening for a reason. All of us are here for a reason. We're all meant to meet. We're all meant to hear our stories for healing and to find out what's going on. There's something new happening, I definitely know it. So it's been such a pleasure to be part of everything, and such a pleasure to meet all of you. And I can't wait to keep hearing more stories. And by the way, I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm going to hug you and smile and go, yeah, I can feel something, because I can actually feel what the person's going through and know what the message is. Sometimes it comes to me intuitively. So I know I'm in the right place, and we're all in the right place, and we're all family. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. The next person, finally, I'm going to bring up Laura Weiser. Great.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd also like to thank Mike and Audrey for inviting me to be a part of this group. It's an honor, and it's somewhere where I've wanted to be for a very long time. Mike did a great job introducing me and telling a little bit about who I am. I just wanted to give you an idea of why I'm here today and why I'm actually involved in this. I had a sighting as a child when I was about 13 with my family, and that kind of brought me into this field, and that's how I got involved in all of this. I've always had a very open mind, and I've always wondered why it happened, and I wanted answers. And being part of Starborn, I think it's a wonderful thing, because it's giving everybody else the opportunity to speak and to have a voice. And I really think that the reality that we live in isn't the reality, the true reality. I think people need to hear your stories, and we're here for you, to support you. And I think it's going to be a wonderful journey, and I'm hoping that more people will come forward and have the opportunity to speak and have a voice. Thank you very much.
I have the greatest crew that there could ever be, and if we are successful, we will be giving out alien driving licenses, and we'll have good. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you very much.